Hello and welcome to Objective Health. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Elliot, and today I'm going to be joined by Doug, Tiffany, and Erica. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
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 So on this show today, what we are going to be looking at is the skin. So we're going to be examining some cool facts about the skin, some things that people probably didn't know about. And then later on, we're going to be going into some of the things that can go wrong with the skin. We're going to be looking at some of the nutrients that you need for healthy skin, and some of the things that are involved in various disorders of skin health, what people might be able to do. So hopefully there'll be some practical recommendations involved in that. But first of all, I'd just like to introduce the topic of skin, actually, because it's quite fascinating. There's loads of things that I didn't previously know about it. So it's technically classed as the largest organ in the body. Now, we don't really tend to view the skin as an organ, but it is, because an organ is defined as a part of the body that's essentially self-contained and plays a specific role. And that is what the skin is. And so we see it's the largest organ, but essentially, aside from, or the way that it differs from many other organs in one way is that it can stretch really quite far. Mm-hmm. It has a unique stretching ability. So other organs can't really do that. Whereas the skin, if you look at the skin on your knuckles, it can stretch a lot more than the skin on your arms, for instance. There's multiple different layers to the skin as well. So you have the epidermis, you have the dermis, and you have the subcutaneous layer as well. And the average person's skin apparently weighs, on average, around 9 pounds. And it spans, if you were to skin a human being and sort of stretch it out, then it spans 21 square feet. So that's quite large. Yeah. It's quite large. Every 28 days or roughly every month, your skin completely renews itself. So the skin that you currently have on your hand and on your arm and on your face will not be there next month. And I find that quite interesting.
Well, oddly enough, though, even though it does regenerate, you still have the same moles and scars and everything that you had 28 days before. Yeah, and the tattoos. So does it regenerate like its vitamin content? Because it doesn't completely regenerate itself, I would argue. Who knows?
Don't know the answer to that question.
Neither do I. Maybe the skin just regenerates, but it keeps on regenerating. Like, I don't know how tattoos work, that's for sure, but like for moles and stuff like that, maybe it just keeps on regenerating kind of in the same pattern that it did before. Same with scars too, right? I mean, scars will stay there,
yeah,
regardless of that skin regenerating.
So you have your same template basically, but it's just newer cells.
It's the morphogenic field.
Yes. That was a good one.
Just keeps on regenerating according to that same thing.
Yeah, well, apparently every minute your skin sheds 30,000 dead cells.
Wow.
And those dead skin cells essentially are released into the air. You can't see them. But I guess if you shine a really bright light, you can see all of the dust. It essentially makes up around 50% of dust. So if you were to dust your house, your home, around the dust around your home, on your furniture, about 50% of that is apparently dead skin.
Another 50% is cat hair.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Well, kind of to add to that too, dead skin is responsible for about 1 billion tons of dust in the atmosphere.
Wow. That's kind of gross to think about, actually.
Humans really are responsible for global warming.
Yeah. Well, they're talking about dimming the sun right now. Maybe they just need more skin dust to to stop global warming. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting stuff about the skin. I mean, I always found it kind of interesting that it's actually like in some ways, it's actually considered part of the immune system, because it's kind of like a physical barrier between the outside world and our internal world. So it's kind of like, it's that physical barrier. And there's a lot of things actually on the skin that are there as kind of defenses and determining what gets absorbed and what doesn't get absorbed. We've got a extensive microbiome on the skin as well that forms, it has defensive capabilities as well as other capabilities. It's like there's an entire ecosystem going on your skin that we're completely unaware of all the time. So I always found that to be pretty fascinating.
And it's responsible for 1/4 of the body's detoxification process. So sometimes it's known as the third kidney.
Like just by excreting stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you think of your skin, you typically see it as some kind of inert substance, like like a rubbery just kind of thing that covers you, but actually it's highly metabolically active, and there's lots of things going on. Like Erica said, it's one of the ways that you not only get rid of things, but it's actually on multiple different fronts how you can allow things to come into your body as well. The skin is somewhat waterproof, or it is waterproof, but at the same time, it's also semi-permeable. So it's permeable to various things, especially fat-soluble things. And so the things that you come into contact with can actually enter through the skin. When you think of things entering your body, especially when we're talking about toxic chemicals and whatnot, you think, okay, if I'm not breathing it in, and if I'm not eating it, if I've got a clean diet and I'm not ingesting or inhaling exhaust fumes and whatnot, then that's a cool way to be healthy. But we often tend to neglect the amount of things that our skin comes into contact with, especially if we're talking about things like cleaning products. I think that's a big one, because many of the cleaning products that we're using are inevitably going to touch the skin, especially if people don't wear gloves. And that is really being absorbed directly through the barrier. And really, there's a good argument to be made. I mean, there are some interesting studies showing that various chemicals, the absorption of various chemicals increases significantly through the skin, because if you were to ingest it orally, then your body has certain sort of inbuilt defense mechanisms to be able to metabolize that and be able to prevent the absorption, or if it is absorbed, go to the liver and dealt with and then excreted back out through the urine or the feces. Whereas when you're ingesting it, when it's touching your skin, essentially, you're bypassing that mechanism, and it has a quicker route to get directly into the bloodstream. So for instance, if we're looking at things like shampoos, sodium lauryl sulfate, or many of the, there's phthalates in shampoos, there's all these kinds of chemicals, and you're putting them directly on your head, especially under hot water, you're potentially getting stuff like into the brain, or very close to the brain. And that's a major concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, the same thing goes for cosmetics. Like, women put all this makeup on their faces, not realizing that whatever they put on their face is going to get absorbed into your skin. Like, I usually don't wear makeup, but the times that I have, I notice that if I put some makeup on during the morning and then go out and come back in later, it's like there's no makeup on my face. Like, where did it go? I didn't rub it off. So it had to have gotten absorbed. And the FDA does not regulate cosmetics the way they do like foodstuffs or medications or supplements that you take into your body. But really, I mean, it's going to go into your body. It's just going by a different route.
Yeah, they're actually, the cosmetics industry is self-regulated on that front, because the FDA has determined it's not the same thing as food, therefore they don't need to regulate it. So
if you can't eat it, then you probably shouldn't be putting it on your skin.
Yeah. Although the interesting thing is that kind of goes both ways. Although, like, there are a lot of things that we need to be cautious about, but it's actually there are methods for actually taking in like nutrients or medicines or that sort of thing through the skin. I'm thinking like about, if you do a magnesium bath or a sodium bicarbonate bath or something like that, essential oils, those kinds of things, you can put those on the skin and they'll actually get absorbed in that way. So, particularly if you're trying to get more magnesium and you just don't want to be doing a lot of supplements, or you don't want to hit bowel tolerance with the supplements or something like that, taking a magnesium bath is actually a good way to do it because your skin will actually take it in.
Yeah, likewise, if someone's got some kind of gastric condition whereby there's severe malabsorption, but you need to get nutrients into someone, transdermal application of other things like, frequently recommend a type of thiamine, which is in a cream, because certain people, or there's certain sulfur compounds, which when people ingest via the gut, because there's such a strong dysbiosis, that they just can't tolerate it. Like they can't tolerate the sulfur. It produces all kinds of toxic gases and things. And so they need to get it into the body in another way. And transdermal is fantastic for that. So that is a really good point.
Would that be one of the benefits of like mineral whirlpools or mineral applications, hot springs or mud baths?
Or hormonal creams that don't get broken down by the stomach acid. You can rub it on yourself and it can still have an effect.
Mm-hmm. There's also, speaking of sulfur compounds, Elliot, there's like that stuff DMSO. And I don't know if people have ever tried that before, but it's like a solvent that will permeate the skin much easier and will actually bind onto other things to permeate the skin. And I've heard stories about people using that. Like one time, a person I know actually cleaned an area with rubbing alcohol and then put on the DMSO cream. And they said they actually felt a buzz because the DMSO actually like pulled the alcohol in with it when it was going into the skin. So that DMSO stuff is pretty amazing. I mean, it has a lot of health benefits in and of itself, but it's also very good as a vehicle for getting other things in through the skin. But you have to be very careful with it. Because if there's anything on your skin that shouldn't be getting in and you use the DMSO cream on it, then that's going to get in. So you have to be very careful with it.
And I guess you'd probably want to also make sure that it's a good quality DMSO, that it's not contaminated with anything. And at the same time, probably contained in some kind of container that's not plastic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And the same can be said for essential oils. So some people have a real sensitivity to essential oils. Something like tea tree is really touted as a good treatment for skin ailments, but sometimes it causes a major reaction almost instantaneously.
Yeah, I kind of burned myself with tea tree oil once.
Really?
Some of these essential oils need to be diluted quite a bit before you put them on your skin.
Yeah, I've had bad experiences with oregano oil before, using it topically, where it was just kind of like, why did I do that? That was terrible. It just burns. Yeah.
So if we're talking about skin, the first thing that probably comes to mind, if we're talking in the context of healthy skin, for many people, the first thing that comes to mind, I guess, in our modern world is some kind of cosmetic, some kind of external applicant that you can put on your skin or that you can wash your skin with. Since this is a show on health and wellness, so we're talking about the health of the skin. People generally associate good skin with creams, with ointments, with products. And I think that's probably due to all of the marketing that's happened in the last sort of 50, 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is there any truth to that? Because I grew up to believe, or I was told or led to believe that, okay, if you want to have healthy skin, then what you need to do is you need to use this assortment of products to apply locally onto your face every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, before a shower, after shower, before bedtime, and whatnot. And I knew lots of people who did that. I personally never did it, but I didn't have very good skin either, so I didn't really know much better. But the point that I'm trying to make is that people are generally, this is the route that they go. If they've got poor skin, if they've got something like eczema or dermatitis or acne or rosacea, they will go the external route. And whilst there may be many beneficial sort of natural options in terms of applying things locally to your skin, I think what we're really going to be talking about on this show today especially is how I think it's important to shift how we perceive skin health, and rather than focusing on things external to the body, actually seeing the skin as a window for what's actually going on inside of the body.
Yeah.
And this is something that many people do not necessarily acknowledge.
Yeah.
But as we know, the healthy skin generally indicates that something is working inside, and unhealthy skin generally demonstrates some kind of dysfunction.
Yeah.
So good skin comes from the inside. So what would we say that good skin is? Is this skin that is uniform in color, free from blemish and sores and rashes? A certain, like picture a young child's skin, how smooth it is and how it kind of glows. It's soft. There's no rough patches. It's really indicative of good health. But it's hard to, I mean, everybody has their own like skin tone and facial features and things that define what looks good for them. But you can kind of tell when you see somebody that looks healthy, even though they may not always be healthy on the inside, but we can always identify like that person has really good skin.
Yeah, it seems one of those things that's, I guess you can try to categorize it. You can try to sort of classify, give it various attributes and say, this is what constitutes good skin. But at the same time, someone could have all of those attributes, but not necessarily have it's almost like an inbuilt, like an innate part of human perception. It's hard to put into words, but there's almost like a glow. Yeah. And it's not very often in the modern world that you come across someone with really healthy skin. Yeah. And it seems that, like you said, I think it was you said, Doug, sometimes someone can have really healthy skin, and they may actually not be very healthy inside. Okay. I've met quite a few people with things like chronic fatigue syndrome who have really good skin, but they can't get out of bed in the morning and they sleep for 14 or 15 hours every day. So they're not healthy. But what I would say is that, okay, if someone's got healthy skin, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're unhealthy. But if someone's got unhealthy skin, it's a good chance that they are unhealthy.
Yeah.
In some way.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. It's interesting too, because the whole skin, like you were talking about, Elliot, like when we think of good skin, we think of somebody having products, and it's like, oh, I see this person has healthy skin. What product are you using? And I think it's unfortunate because, I mean, as we're about to get into the idea, like the skin grows from the inside, right? So it's like your skin is constantly regenerating, like we said. And if your skin is unhealthy, then that is an indication that something on the inside isn't right. But people's first go-to to that is an external solution. And the problem is that, like, in holistic health circles, where people really should know this kind of thing and kind of be more on board with kind of thing, they really aren't. They're still looking for external stuff. It's just, it has to be natural. It has to not have all these phthalates and all these other kinds of garbage in them, which I think is good. But at the same time, it's like they're still not going to kind of the root cause of what the problem is, where the root cause is obviously like something internal is going wrong. And that is reflecting on the skin. And it's now almost like this cosmetic and this cosmetic industry has kind of just absorbed this kind of natural thing. And so it's like all their products are kind of natural. And that's still everybody's kind of go-to. So it's kind of like, I want to be natural, but instead of going to the root cause of the problem and trying to solve it that way, you just go for natural products. It's, I think it's kind of unfortunate because it really, like, to solve skin issues, you got to dig pretty deep, both literally and figuratively.
Well, I have a question for maybe you, Elliot, or all of you here. What about delayed reactions? So say you have an allergy to something and you eat it and you don't get an issue in your skin for maybe days or weeks. You know, like it could be anything really. All of a sudden, though, you have patchy dry spots or itching, and it's hard to kind of pin down what it is. I mean, I know in the past we've talked about the importance of the elimination diet, but how would you track something like that? Or how would you kind of know if it was something out of the ordinary that was causing you this ailment?
I mean, if you're looking at like a 3-day or 4-day delayed reaction, it's going to be pretty difficult. It's going to be really hard. I mean, people try for years and they don't identify. I think in that regard, to really identify what it was, simply from looking at sort of what you've got right in front of you without doing any kind of testing or anything, then you would probably have to go on like a really restrictive elimination diet to be able to find that out. And it's unfortunate that that's sometimes the way that the immune system works. You know, you have different types of immune cells. They're called immune globulins, and some of them are really fast acting. And so if someone's got a problem with a type of food, and it evokes what we call an immunoglobulin E reaction, like an allergic reaction, they will know within, you know, a very short period of time, and they know to stay away from that kind of food. But ultimately, if it's an IgG reaction, as we know, that can, I mean, it can take days, it can take weeks, you know, and it's so very difficult to identify something like that. Now, it also depends on what kind of problem you're looking at as well, because if it's something like acne, then there seems to be a very sort of common set of foods or lifestyle factors which seem to be implicated in this in most people. So it's like, okay, if someone gets acne, you can guarantee it's probably dairy if they eat dairy, and if they don't, if it's not dairy, it might be sugar, it might be, you know, there are a very specific set of things which are likely to cause acne in someone's diet. Now, if it's something like hives, that's a little bit more difficult to break down because there's no types of foods per se which are known to cause hives. It's like hives and the more histamine type reactions. Okay, there are certain foods which are high in histamine, but actually, if someone has, I mean, they could be reacting to any component in the food, and that could be affecting downstream metabolites and downstream reactions involving things like histamine. So they might associate it with certain foods which contain histamine, whereas actually it could be the salicylates, it could be the phenols, it could be the oxalates. I mean, it's very difficult to say, you know. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
And then there's also the confounding issue that everybody reacts to everything differently. So one person might have a skin reaction to eating a strawberry, and another person might get diverticulitis or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead, Elliot.
I was just going to say some people react in ways, or they have reactions which don't involve the skin, but which are typically a lot more covert, let's say, or less identifiable. It might be brain fog. It could be anxiety. It could be insomnia. It could be something like that, which is a little bit more difficult to pinpoint as a dietary induced problem. Most people don't associate these things with diet, whereas at least with the skin, those of us who are kind of lucky, for me, I can say for me personally, my skin tells me when I'm eating something that I'm not meant to be eating. And I kind of see that as a gift, while at the same time a curse, because it's not nice to have not very nice skin sometimes, but at the same time, it's like a radar. And some people have that, other people don't have that. And it kind of depends on where the weak point is in the body, I think, and how that kind of communicates that. And so everyone needs to try to get in touch with their own body and find out how it tries to communicate various things,
Yeah.
Well, you brought up acne, Elliot. And I think I learned something interesting when doing the research for the show, that apparently around the turn of the century, they were calling acne skin diabetes.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that because they were detecting sugar actually in the skin, if I'm not mistaken, like in the actual, I don't know if it was in like the actual acne itself or something, or they were just they detected that in people with acne there actually was sugar in the skin. And I found that pretty interesting, because it's kind of like I've known for a long time that that acne is related to sugar. It's like teenagers kind of learn that. They're kind of like, if somebody's breaking out a lot, people just be like, oh, you shouldn't be eating sugar, or you got to lay off the chocolate bars or something like that. It seems like it's kind of like common enough knowledge that it's even at the point of just being kind of like hearsay at this point. But they actually have found that there is a connection there, that eating sugar actually can lead to acne in some people. And yeah, I mean, I just found that kind of interesting.
Well, I think that one of the reasons why acne affects teens more, something that I learned, is because it's tied to insulin-like growth factor 1, or IGF-1. And teens, since they're still growing, they have a lot of this hormone in their bodies. And combined with excessive consumption of sugar, it can trigger acne.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there seems to be, like, with acne, it's interesting because there seems to be multiple different angles from which to approach acne. For one person, it could be like an insulin resistance, like in the skin, but also like systemic. So I think the theory goes that if someone is insulin resistant, they are going to need to be producing more insulin. They're going to have higher blood glucose, but they're also going to eventually produce more insulin. Now, insulin is anabolic and it has several downstream effects. So one of them is by promoting insulin like growth factor. Another one is through enhancing the conversion of testosterone to a downstream metabolite called dihydrotestosterone. And so there's an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase, and this takes testosterone, converts it into DHT, it's called. And insulin like growth factor, they speed up this conversion. Now, when this happens sort of in the skin, what you get is essentially the skin starts to produce, it's basically triggered to start producing more sebum. And the sebum is like a oily kind of, it's made up of fatty acids and cholesterol and that kind of stuff. And so typically if someone's got acne, they will have oily skin as well. And it's the oily skin which essentially what they call clog the pores. In a simplified way, it clogs up the pores of the skin, and then you have like inflammatory markers like in the skin, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and then you have like the infiltration of some kind of bacteria, and it's like the skin barrier is basically disordered in some way. And so this is what typically contributes to inflammatory acne. But now we know that sugar does this it causes this, it's kind of high insulin like growth factor. But they're also saying that that might actually be one of the reasons why dairy does as well, because dairy, especially, not so much butter, but for certain people it does seems to be butter as well, but especially cheese, milk. Milk is a big one, yogurt, these kinds of things. I think they either contain insulin like growth factor, or they contain certain things which like increase IGF-1 in the body. And so dairy just seems to be such a massive trigger as well. But it's only for some people, and not for many other people. So yeah.
So is it the case that in some skin conditions, say the skin is an excretory organ, and you have the liver and the kidneys that cleanse the blood and detoxify the blood, could you get some kind of skin ailment because your liver and your kidneys are not keeping up internally with cleansing the blood and detoxifying, so thereby certain bacteria or toxins get pushed out through the skin, where if your internal organs were healthier and doing their jobs, then your skin would be better?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite well established. That's what the naturopaths and the sort of traditional Ayurvedic or traditional Chinese medicine, that's what they've said for thousands of years. But ultimately, that's quite, the mechanism is quite well established in science, like up to date. That does happen. And so, yeah, your two primary routes. So your liver via the, so things are processed in the liver, either they go through the kidney or they go through the gut. And so if there's inflammation in the gut, I think this is why gut issues and IBS are really tied to so many different skin conditions. Like, we'll talk about this a little bit later, I'm sure, but if we look at practically any different kind of skin condition, there's always some kind of dysbiosis or imbalance with the digestive system in some way. And so the digestive system is really the main way that you're going to be excreting, a large majority of your toxins. And those are processed in the liver, and they're ideally meant to go back into the gut. Unfortunately, you can have all sorts of blockages in the gut, and if there's any kind of inflammation or anything, then it's going to stop you from dumping all the toxic stuff from the liver into the gut. And then that overburden will go to the kidney and be added to whatever is being offloaded in the kidney. But ultimately, the kidney can only deal with so much, because the kidney tubules, or the nephrons, the cells in the kidney, are very sensitive to oxidative stress. And so if you're pumping through loads of stuff through the kidneys, that's potentially going to spell trouble. So what you're going to do is you're going to divert it towards the skin. And there's very good reason to think that actually many of the, especially things like eczema and many other kind of rashes and things, may actually be this overburdening of the other routes of detoxification, and you're actually using the skin as like the last ditch resort. Because if you can't get it through the skin, then there's a good chance it's going to circulate around the organs. That's not what you want.
It's interesting because I was reading about a guy, and this guy, I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but he was kind of a health practitioner around early part of the century, like 1900s or something like that. And he did this test. Sorry, it wasn't that early. It was probably around like the 60s or 70s, actually. But anyway, he would stand in a closet, and he had everything, like, it kind of had some plastic laid out so it would catch everything. And he did skin brushing. And he did that for, like, I guess a couple of weeks or something like that. And then he took all of the stuff that had come off and gathered on the plastic on the floor and had it analyzed. And he said it was indistinguishable from urine. What? So it kind of shows that it kind of basically is the same thing, that what the skin is actually, what you're putting out of your skin is excretions from inside the body, all the stuff that the body actually needs to get rid of.
It's a very interesting experiment.
Yeah.
I'll remember that the next time I do my skin brushing, which after researching for this show, I think I want to start doing that again because I did it for a while and it felt good, but I don't think I did it long enough to notice any like real benefits, except that, it's supposed to be good for the lymph and blood circulation and exfoliating your skin. So it might be a good experiment to try.
Yeah, I was doing it for a while too, but I similarly kind of fell off because I didn't really notice anything or anything like that. And I also, while reading for the show, was kind of like, oh yeah, skin brushing. Maybe I should pick that
How
up
did I
again.
forget about that?
That's the rationale for doing sauna as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it's so cherished in various parts of the world, Russia, sort of Scandinavia. They love their sauna.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably because it makes them feel so good. There's a reason it makes them feel so good. Apart from releasing endorphins and all this kinds of stuff, it's actually really helping their body to get rid of a lot of the waste.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I remember reading somewhere about how detoxifying from heavy metals, saunas are really good for. Actually, just getting stuff out of your system. It's actually really beneficial for that. I remember even reading that it was more efficient actually than like the urine, than getting rid of metals that way. I don't know if that's true though, actually.
Yeah, aside from the metals as well, especially when it's a far infrared sauna, not only metals, but you're looking at things like plastics as well. Plastics, mold toxins, kind of organic chemicals, BPA, pesticides, all of these kinds of things. Some of them are like really quite difficult to get rid of into the feces, if there's some kind of gut dysfunction. And so it seems to be a key part. I mean, many of the doctors who sort of do the functional medicine thing, who specialize in things like detoxification, one of the key parts of those protocols is actually like daily infrared sauna. And it seems to help people massively. But I think it's one of those things that you kind of take for granted because one, it seems so easy. It's kind of cheap. And you can't see anything in your sweat, can you?
Yeah.
You can't see anything coming out, but it's there.
Sometimes you can taste it though.
It depends if you taste your sweat.
If you like lick your lips, like around your lips, it's not just the salty taste that you taste sometimes. Sometimes I've tasted things that I can't quite identify. Like, what is this that's coming out of my skin? But then there are some people who can't tolerate getting into a sauna. There are some people who don't sweat. Like I've gotten into a far infrared blanket a few times recently, and I just did not sweat. I got very, very hot. And other times I've sweated buckets.
I remember Sherry Rogers saying something. She's the one who wrote that book, Detoxify or Die. And she said that the longer it takes you to sweat, the more toxic you were. Yeah. So bad news for you there, Tiff.
Okay. But exercise is a good way to sweat. I mean, if you can tolerate exercising hard enough to make yourself sweat, but you have to be in fairly good physical condition, no joint problems or things like that. I think that's maybe a way that some people who are not technically healthy, like back in the day, 20 some years ago, my diet was not that great. I would still exercise and sweat out tons. Maybe that was part of what made me be as healthy or not as healthy as I was at that time, just because of the detoxification of sweating every day.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of things that can go wrong in the liver. And actually, if just going back to acne as well, I said briefly before that in some cases of acne, at least, it can actually be caused by what is known as a deficiency of glutathione in the liver. Okay, so there's an inflammatory component to acne. This isn't necessarily something that many skin cosmetics kind of things, not something that they factor in, but essentially it's an internal inflammatory process, an inflammatory process in the skin. And really, if there's some kind of oxidation in the skin, you need your cells to be able to basically counteract that, and they use something called glutathione. But then also in the liver you have glutathione, which is basically binding up with loads of crap that you come into contact with daily, and carrying that out in some way. And so if there is any kind of deficiency in any one of the detoxification pathways, then it's potentially going to not necessarily come out in your skin, but rather it's going to foster an environment that allows bacteria to live on your skin and kind of infiltrate into your skin. So either way, it seems that your liver plays a key role in this. And I think that's the way that, or that's from a more traditional perspective, various of the traditional schools of thought would say similar. They'd say like, okay, you're hot or cold, or or your liver is not working, and they didn't have access to specialized liver function tests in a laboratory. They just kind of palpate and then look at your skin and say, well, okay, your liver or your kidneys. And it seems that is actually kind of one of the ways, or that is where science has actually taken us now. But aside from that, there's also the gut. And the question is, does the gut actually precede problems with the liver and with the kidney? Because the gut is the first point of call. Yeah, it's the first way really that most things are going to get into the body. We've spoke about things get into the skin, but really most of the contact with the external environment is actually in the gut. And so if anything goes wrong with the gut, and so when you look at the clinical research, it's so clear it's not clear whether it's causative or not. I would bet it probably is causative, can't guarantee, but there are very, very strong associations between things like acne vulgaris, rosacea, atopic dermatitis, or eczema, in other words. What else are there? Psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, many different kinds of skin conditions. What do they find? They find certain pathogens living in the gut. They find intestinal permeability. They find elevated levels of bacterial lipopolysaccharide. If you've got a state of some kind of gut dysfunction, malabsorption, hypochlorhydria, so low stomach acid, this is frequently found in people with acne. It's like, okay, you foster an environment in the gut where you're not digesting your fats, you're not digesting your proteins, you're not digesting your carbohydrates. And so you're allowing certain bacteria to thrive, say in the small intestine. You develop something like an IBS, something like that. You're producing loads of this bacterial metabolite, let's say. It's called lipopolysaccharide. And that can essentially cause leaky gut, or it can get through the gut barrier, get into the bloodstream and sort of go around the organs. It can get to the skin, it can get to the liver, it can deplete the liver's resources of glutathione and all the other antioxidants. Then it can cause inflammation systemically. And it's like many of the skin eruptions and things could also be a manifestation of gut dysfunction, So that's a key point in this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that's kind of interfering with your digestion or just eating crappy food, essentially, can change the bacterial balance of the gut, which has all kinds of downstream effects that can then therefore end up showing up in the skin. So it's not necessarily like a direct connection, but the bacterial balance of the gut can have an indirect effect on the skin. Is that essentially what you're saying, Elliot?
Yeah, basically. That's what it seems like from the research. And in terms of anecdotal reports, people who have skin issues, the flare-ups of the skin issues generally tend to correlate well with when they've eaten something that they don't agree with, when they've eaten something that they can't digest, when they've eaten something that causes them a flare-up in their IBS symptoms. It manifests in the skin. Like I said, in my own case, I don't digest dairy very well at all, and whenever I eat dairy, I know about it because it comes out of my skin. And that's, it seems to be a very common thing. But at the same time, could it also be, I mean, you've got the bacterial component, but then if someone has digestive issues, that is also very likely going to stop their body's ability from absorbing certain nutrients. And there are certain nutrients which are so important for skin health. Look at zinc. So if someone's eating a diet really high in grains, grains contain phytic acid, and phytic acid basically binds with zinc and stops it from being absorbed. Likewise, coffee. If someone's drinking 6 coffees a day with every meal, then that inhibits zinc absorption. And if you don't have enough zinc, or if you have chronic diarrhea, for instance, good chance you're not absorbing much. And zinc is so essential for the skin. That could be the route by which the gut affects the skin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I heard something interesting about zinc, actually. There was some speculation that perhaps the reason teenage boys tend to have bad skin is that they're engaging in a certain activity quite frequently that depletes them of zinc. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but
well, I looked at some of the research on the amount of zinc that a male would typically lose via ejaculation. Chris Masterjohn spoke about this a couple of times, I think, and he basically says that anything sort of less than 2 times or 2 times in a day is probably not going to have that much of an effect. But if it's any more than that, then it's theoretically possible. And what we have to consider about teenagers as well is that teenage males specifically are building a body structure, they're building muscles, they're building bone, they're broadening out. And to be able to build muscle, you need so much zinc. In fact, much of your zinc stores are actually in your muscle. And so you on proteins, in fact, on every single protein in the body, practically, you have, like, when a protein folds like that, it sticks together. It does that via these things called zinc fingers. Okay, so zinc is essentially a component of every enzyme in the body in every single protein, or it's needed for the synthesis of every protein and every enzyme. Okay, because it does lots of cool things, basically. And so if a teenage adolescent male is building muscle, they're physically active, they're, maybe going to the gym, they're, playing football or whatever, then their zinc requirement is going to be much higher. Likewise, you need zinc to synthesize testosterone. And if their testosterone is high, that's going to place more requirements on their zinc status. And so if their zinc is going towards all of these different things, then there's a good chance that the skin is not going to be prioritized.
Yeah.
That would make sense, no?
Yeah, absolutely. So
do we want to talk about another weird skin issue, like skin tags? Those little hanging balls of flesh that are usually found in your folds or on the back of your neck, your armpits. And one thing that I learned not too long ago was that they could be a sign of pre-diabetes.
Yeah, apparently they're correlated with insulin resistance. That's something that some way that insulin resistance can actually show up externally. And one thing they were saying about it actually is that doctors can use this as a way of kind of, not as a diagnosis necessarily, but as something to look for. If their patient shows up and starts having skin tags, and they showed up, it's something they hadn't had before, and suddenly they start showing up, then it's an indication that maybe they are heading towards diabetes.
Mhm.
Actually, with the doctors kind of recognize that, I think.
Well, so that people who have skin tags have higher blood glucose readings and higher triglycerides. And one of the things that cause high blood glucose and triglycerides are overconsumption of carbohydrates. But one of the questions that I have about these skin tags, like, what is it, like a protective mechanism? What's the purpose of having these little fleshy protuberances? Is there something the body is trying to push out? And
No,
I can't figure it out.
that's a good question.
Hmm.
I've read about that in the past. You have the weird kind of discoloration in the neck, yeah? So
Yeah.
like hyperpigmentation in the folds of the neck, and the thickening, like edema of the neck, but then also these weird skin tags, especially on the neck, like on the back of the neck. I don't know what the mechanism of that is. I have absolutely no idea why that would happen. I'd like to know. I'm
Mm.
sure there's a reason for it, but
Yeah.
it seems a bit bizarre, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe
very
it's
strange.
some sort of early warning signal.
Hmm.
What a strange signal.
Or maybe it is protective in some way to protect the internal organs from, the burden of too much sugar, and they just push it out. But I guess that's how it comes out. I don't know.
Hmm.
Well, in terms of, I mean, in the context of skin tags, there are they referred to? I'm not sure what they're referred to in the public eye. It might be liver spots, but essentially they're discoloration. It's like small blobs of darkened material on the face, and it's usually in older or elderly individuals. And I think that they refer to them as liver spots. I'm not
Mhm.
entirely sure, but again, I don't know why they or how they knew to say that it's liver spots, but there's a good correlation with the mechanism of what that is. It's basically oxidized polyunsaturated fatty acids. So, you have omega-6 fatty acids, and basically they oxidize and they form like a pigment called lipofuscin. And the reason it goes dark is because of the iron. So it oxidizes the iron, and you have like these dark discolor. Like if you look at a picture of Morgan Freeman, like you'll see he's got them all over his face. But there's, I'm sure if you just Google it, you can see. But essentially, yeah, that I think there's a pretty good correlation between when you get those spots on your face and the fact that your liver is not very healthy. It's overburdened with all of these pro-inflammatory fats, and you're oxidizing iron. So, there's a ton of oxidative stress. Your liver's not necessarily dealing with it, and for some reason, you get these deposits on your face.
Are they actually deposits, like they're little bumps, or is it just a discoloration?
It looks
on Morgan Freeman's face, it looks like little moles to me. I have some, and I have relatives who have that too. And if you look like on recent pictures of Bill Cosby's, his face is like that too. So I don't know, like if they had that when they were younger, or if it's something that just got more pronounced as they got older.
Yeah, generally they look a little bit like moles. They can happen on people's hands as well. So they're like discolorations, and some of them can look like moles. Other times it just looks like brown patches or like freckles on the hands. If you look at a 90-year-old's hands, you usually see that the hand goes really kind of discolored, and that you've got all of these sort of brown spots on the skin. And that's basically like oxidized, degraded toxic fats, which for some reason deposit in the skin. But again, it's a pretty good indication. I guess the reason I'm trying to say it is just to kind of reinforce the point that the skin is, it's quite an amazing communication system. It tells you when something is essentially going wrong inside.
What's interesting though is that these things, like I had a skin tag show up at one point in my life, like I don't know, I might have been in puberty or something. It was a long time ago, and it's never gone away. So it's kind of interesting that these things seem to show up, but even if you correct the problem, they don't disappear. At least as far as I can tell, they don't disappear, unless there's something still wrong with me.
Could be.
But I think it says something about aging too, like back to what Tiffany was saying earlier in the show about babies having glowing skin and very clean and nice smell. And then you'll notice with children who have allergies, like usually after they stop breastfeeding, start introducing foods, almost instantaneously they'll break out in rashes, whether it's diaper rash or even thrush. And then if the child continues to eat that way throughout life, I mean, maybe these skin tags, these things show up later in life because the system is just overburdened.
Yeah, it seems to be that way.
Well, maybe there's some correlation too between, stopping breastfeeding or formula and starting introducing some foods. And then you notice like maybe around the ages of 4 to 6, that's when you get these skin eruptions like the chickenpox or measles or things like that. That seems almost universally all children go through that. Like, what does that mean?
And it seems like a lot of children now have chronic eczema issues or allergic reactions, the whole peanut thing. And so it seems, again, like they're overloaded.
Well, maybe like chickenpox and measles is like a detoxification that everybody needs to go through at that point in their life. And then once that kind of immune response gets learned, then later in life you can become healthier. Because there have been some studies where like if people don't get chickenpox as a child or measles as a child, they end up, with more allergies, or if they catch those diseases when they're older, it can be fatal in some cases. So
yeah, I read a study actually. It was a really recent one, posted the other day, and it was basically talking about how the measles virus was like one of the most potent anti-cancer agents.
Yeah, I read that as well.
Like known. Like it was killing cancer cells like selectively, not killing other cells. It was just killing the cancer cells. So it's like, is there some kind of relationship here? That's very interesting. I mean, there's also been there was once someone in like the alternative health circles who postulated that maybe chickenpox is actually one of the ways that babies, similar to what you were just saying, Tiff, one of the ways that babies or children actually detoxify certain metabolic products that they've gained from their mom that they don't necessarily need. Like this person was speculating that it's a way for babies to actually get rid of oxalates. So they're getting loads of oxalates from their mother's breast milk, whatever stored in the body. And actually by having chickenpox, they work with the virus to essentially like get all this stuff out really quickly without overburdening other detox pathways. I don't know if there's any truth to that, because there's no evidence for that whatsoever. But it was just an idea. It was just an idea, and I think it's interesting to contemplate.
Well, Stephanie Seneff was talking when we interviewed Stephanie Seneff a while back. She was postulating different things like this, like that different bacteria or viruses or stuff like that actually do have kind of a symbiotic beneficial effect, even though they might have a negative effect as well. Overall, they might actually be helping to compensate for something. So it's interesting. I mean, it's very difficult to to actually know whether that's true or not. But it's really fascinating to think about, actually.
Yeah, maybe it's just some sort of health rite of passage that everybody should go through in order to strengthen their immune system.
Yeah, since the introduction of vaccination, especially for chickenpox, now we see adults getting shingles at really scary rates. And I know I never had chickenpox as a child, but I did get them at 21, and it was the worst experience I've ever had.
Geez.
And I broke out in them so bad. They were in my nose and my eyelids. And I actually had to be in the hospital. Well, they have to separate you, right? Because you're quote unquote contagious. And they ended up giving me a very strong medication for herpes virus. And that seemed to be the only thing that actually did away with the intense itching on every single nerve ending in my body.
Oh my God.
And I will say one thing that helped, if anyone as an adult gets chickenpox, is taking a bath with golden seal root. That really seemed to help eliminate the intense discomfort with it.
So do we want to talk about some remedies since you mentioned golden seal?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, witch hazel has a pretty good reputation. It's been used for a very long time. I guess Native Americans used to use it, and they say that it helps certain skin ailments. It helps swelling. It's astringent because it can make the proteins in the skin cells kind of draw more tightly together. It's been used for varicose veins, hemorrhoids, sunburns, bug bites, stings, stretch marks. People have really good, I guess, good testimonials about using witch hazel.
Yeah.
I've never really, I always forget about that one. Like if
I do too.
happened, and I was like, I always, you know, witch hazel doesn't really come up when I think of things to help cure.
My go-to usually is aloe. I find that aloe is really good, especially if it's like a wound or something like that on the skin or some kind of abrasion or something. I find that aloe works like really well. Like even just for like razor burn or something like that, aloe seems to work like amazing. It's my go-to for a lot of different stuff. I think that's why they put it in so much stuff. I don't know. I think fresh aloe is probably a lot better than a lot of the products you get out there, but yeah, I find aloe is really good.
And you can drink it too.
You can.
You can
Although it
take
does have a laxative effect.
It is disgusting.
Yeah, it's really gross. I agree. Yeah. Well, another one, I mean, the thing is, like we were saying about the skin, it's like a lot of it is coming from like internal. It's kind of like what you're feeding yourself. I think, in general, if you're having skin issues and your skin is not good, the thing you really have to do is look at your diet. Witch hazel, aloe, all that kind of stuff is probably not going to do very much. Cutting the sugar out, cutting the carbs in general out. Try cutting out dairy as well, because a lot of people do seem to have problems with that. Going low carb, ketogenic. I think those are kind of the first steps, really. Doing things that will boost your collagen, like bone broth. Bone broth is like fantastic as far as like getting your collagen and other amino acids as well, glycine. Like those things are all like what you need to actually build skin. So I'd say like those would be my first go-tos before saying like, try an herbal or something like that.
Yeah. Also, just to add to that, things that I found work fairly well. Vitamin E for dandruff. That, like, I've had quite a few people who say that works fairly quickly. At the same time, there's quite a lot of research on vitamin E for eczema as well. It has kind of like an immunomodulatory effect, but it's also an antioxidant in the skin. So the research is quite clear that vitamin E can be really helpful for atopic dermatitis, it's called. For acne, zinc and vitamin A are like, I mean, they used to use Accutane. Some people still do, I think. Accutane is basically isotetranoin or tetranoin, and that is like a synthetic vitamin A like analog. It's a synthetic form of vitamin A, but vitamin A is seriously potent at improving acne. So if someone's got acne, there's a good chance that it's either something to do with zinc or vitamin A, and by taking those two things, which you get on like an animal-based diet or with a diet really high in animal products, especially things like liver. I mean, liver is great in zinc, and it's really great for vitamin A as well. Thing is, in terms of vitamin A, it's important to understand that just eating carrots and other sort of orange and red fruits and vegetables isn't necessarily going to cut it, because unless you know your genetics, I would err on the side of caution. Because if you're like Caucasian, if you're from the northern hemisphere, like I am, there tends to be a lot of us who have a certain genetic profile. I am one of those people. So it's called the BCR01, I believe. And it basically codes for an enzyme which converts plant-derived vitamin A, so like carotene and the carotenoids, into usable vitamin A. Okay, so you can't use the stuff that you find in plants to protect your skin. You need to convert it into active vitamin A. And if you've got a certain genetic profile, then you may not necessarily be able to do that very well. And I find that if like my requirement for organ meat is really quite high, and I can't just eat things like carrots and stuff. My skin is generally of suboptimal quality when I rely on those things for my vitamin A. I need to have things like organs, heart, liver, egg yolks, and that kind of stuff. So that's something important. Also, another thing that has been shown to be helpful is actually taking probiotics. So like oral probiotics has actually been shown to be really helpful, along with I would probably some kind of digestive enzymes or something if you feel like it's coming from your gut. But probably the most significant factor, if it's coming in from your gut, is actually getting rid of the foods that you don't agree with your gut at the moment, because you can take all the supplements in the world, but if there's something that your body is not agreeing with, I really don't, in my experience, in all of the stuff that I've read over the years, I don't think there's any amount of supplements that you can take which can fix an intolerance or a lack of tolerance to food that you're eating. I think maybe it can be done long term after you've sort of like had a long period away from it. But I seriously don't think that you can just eat a modern diet. If your skin issues are a problem and you want to fix them, you're going to seriously need to change your diet. Like, you're going to have to.
I think dropping grains is actually another thing, because grains, like, I know specifically with psoriasis, grains are supposed to be really bad. Like, so many people they drop grains from their diet and their psoriasis clears right up. I mean, not everybody, so it's not like necessarily a cure-all, but honestly, I don't think grains are really food. I think that people are really doing themselves a disservice by eating those. And so I think if you are having skin issues, yeah, it's like Ellie is saying, like, look to the diet.
There's also something else which is external. It is external, but also sunlight is pretty good in some cases. In other cases, it can actually exacerbate like a skin issue. In general terms, with things like psoriasis or things like eczema or acne, it's usually quite good. In other conditions, like sometimes hives, things like that, sunlight can actually trigger something like that. So you have to kind of find your tolerance. But also things like photobiomodulation, so low-level laser therapy or red light therapy, that's generally got some very good research behind it in terms of improving the skin health. Living an indoor lifestyle just probably isn't the best thing, Also, watching what you put on your face as well. Like, if you're coming into contact with, like, I don't know, all of this toxic stuff, you know, these artificial chemicals and everything, and you're touching your face all the time. Like, I wouldn't be bothered about the bacteria. You know, if you're working out in the garden, yeah, touch your face all you want. I don't think that will be a problem. But when you're, like, say, dealing with receipts, or, you know, you're touching plastic, and or you're on your computer, and all the plastic from your computers, like, you know, actually, like, getting into your fingers, and then you touching your face and stuff. It's being mindful about, like, what you're putting on your skin and stuff like that. I think that's quite important as well.
Well, you know, it's interesting kind of to add to that, what you're saying, Elliot, is now they're actually making in the quote unquote natural health line probiotic lotions. So lotions with probiotics added to them. So they must be kind of onto this theory, you know, about the gut issue and skin issues. But I couldn't believe when I saw they were carrying a product line that it's actually called probiotic lotion.
Well, I wonder about that. It might be a bit of a gimmick, but
Yeah.
honestly, I remember we talked about it on the show a while back when we did our show about MRSA. There was the guy who actually cured his MRSA skin infection by using topical kombucha. So I even occasionally will take, like, kombucha. I've got some in, like, a spray bottle that I've brewed myself, and I just spray it on my skin. I think it's a good idea to kind of just keep the bacterial balance balanced.
And stay away from hand sanitizer.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, and constantly washing your face as well. I think this is bizarre. I don't think human beings ever did this. Like, I honestly, I think you would wash your face with water. The idea that you should be washing your face multiple times every day, like, that's problematic, because what you're doing is, when you use soap to wash your face, you're washing off all of the natural oils, the sebum, the, you know, sebaceous liquid and everything like that. You've got natural antimicrobials on your skin designed to protect your skin from the various bacteria which cause things like infection, which cause things like acne or inflammation on your skin. And when you're washing your face, what you're doing is you're actually washing off the oil, and you're triggering it to produce more sebum. You're triggering it to produce more, but at the same time, you're taking off all of the antimicrobial protection from your skin. So ultimately, what people, I mean, there's so many testimonials of people who finally just stopped washing their face and their skin cleared up. Like, just
I'm
stop
glad
touching
to
it.
hear that, because I've never been a face washer.
Me neither. Just don't touch it. Just leave it.
I wash my
Yeah,
face
I
in the
let it get
shower.
wet and put water on my face in the shower, but I rarely
That's
use
it.
soap on my face.
Maybe I should stop using soap on my face. Interesting. I learned something today.
And just in general, for skin that gets a little dry, like I have to wash my hands a lot, tallow is really good for moisturizing your skin.
I've read that, yeah.
And even things like jojoba oil or kukui nut oil. I mean, I use massage oil on my face, and people are horrified. They can't believe that I'm putting this on my face, but I don't get a reaction from it at all. And as long as it doesn't have any ingredients, but just one of those good healthy oils, seems to work.
Yeah, sounds like some pretty good advice there. Does anyone else have anything to add on skin?
Yeah.
I think we've covered it pretty good.
Okay. So shall we go to the pet health segment?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's do that.
Hello, and welcome to the Pet Health segment of the Health and Wellness Show. The spring is upon us, and it means all kinds of skin allergies. And there are animals, particularly dogs and particularly Labradors, but not only, they are sensitive to all kinds of allergens. They can excessively lick their paws and other body parts. So watch the following video in order to learn possible solutions that you can try at home. And don't forget to stay till the end to watch a funny animal video. Have a great weekend and goodbye.
If your dog is excessively licking his or her paws, then you need to watch this video. So for the majority of dogs who have this, where they're excessively licking their paws, I mean, the first big thing I say is like, just check them. Do a basic exam. Just make sure there isn't some type of foreign body, or there's not anything in between in your dog's pad, in between the digits. I mean, have a good look. Right, Pipster. The most common cause by far is dog allergies. Your dog is having some type of allergic reaction, be it to food, be it to something environmental, such as what's happening now with the spring. We have all this pollen causing them to itch, and it's just showing up as excessive paw licking. But secondarily, many of these dogs have an underlying yeast infection. So what happens is that they've got a primary allergy causing their skin to react. Secondarily, yeast can overgrow, making them very itchy. So this is my anti-paw licking foot soak. So what you're going to need is 1 cup of green tea. So I've used 1 tablespoon of loose green tea leaves. I put it in about 2 cups of water in the bottom. You want to let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes till it cools down. Cool enough that it's comfortable to touch to your skin. A cup for me. And a cup for Pippi's foot. Or your dog's foot. So we're using 2 tablespoons of this. It does especially well at being anti-yeast. And we know that is a problem with many of the dogs that have excessive paw licking and primary skin allergies. Third in this wonderful smelling concoction, we're going to have 1 tablespoon of salt. Here is nice Himalayan salt from the co-op. Just plain old sodium chloride. Regular table salt is fine. Fourth, we're going to add 10 drops of lavender essential oil. I especially like the essential oils from Young Living based on the quality of the product, how well it works, and how it's been backed up by research. So we're just going to mix this all together. The cup of green tea, the 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, the 1 tablespoon of salt, and the 10 drops of lavender essential oil. And now that I've added in the lavender oil, it actually smells pretty good. Okay, Pipster, let's try the foot. So here's my cup or so of fluid. Just want to immerse your dog's toes in it. Good girl. Good girl, Pippi. Okay, it doesn't hurt. You want to ideally leave that for a full 5 minutes. If your dog has any type of open wound, don't use this because the apple cider vinegar can be quite irritating. I'd rather you just use something like the green tea as a soak first. 5 minutes later, Pippi's foot is soaked. She actually has kind of a pleasant smell. Now let's just see, will she lick it or not? You can soak your dog's foot twice daily for 7 days and then assess whether or not it's being effective.
But sometimes more unexpected sounds grab our attention. Like this desert rain frog. Squeaking viral sensation. $11 million hits and counting. It sounds like a dog toy. But actually, this is the sonorous war cry of a very angry frog. Ferocious.
That was cute.
I thought it was a squeaky toy.
Yeah, it did sound exactly like a squeaky toy. Kind of looked like one too, actually.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I think that's everything for today. We had a look at the skin. We saw how it does some weird and wonderful things, and hopefully you have a bit of a better idea about how to troubleshoot some of your skin issues. I think the key is to look inside rather than outside. So yeah, I want to thank my co-hosts, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll tune in next week for the next show. So thank you everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.